All right, hi, Akua here. I'm just jumping on this Monday afternoon for me to talk about self-awareness a little bit more. So last week I sort of jumped into talking about one of the easiest ways to build your self-awareness, and that's really through reflection. So doing that yourself, self-reflection. And so, right, there's three basic ways, right, to build that self-awareness. One, reflection. Two, assessments. And then last but not least, leveraging feedback. So today I wanted to talk about feedback. So for those of you joining who don't know who I am, my name is, I love to spell it out, A-K-U-A. I respond to Akua or Aqua or Akua. I'm an executive coach and strategic advisor. And my favorite thing to do is to help leaders focus and connect to scale. And I do that by teaching leaders time management skills and leadership skills. And so one of the steps I always take my clients through is building their self-awareness. And so today I wanted to talk a little bit more about building your self-awareness by leveraging some feedback. And I actually have some of my own feedback from back in 2016 that I got from my own team. And just to let everyone know, if you are watching the replay, please go ahead and type replay in the comments. I also do have a free guide if you're interested in learning a bit more about my approach to leadership, my approach to getting things done, my approach from going from being an overwhelmed manager to an aligned executive. So I'll put a comment in the links to that free guide. All right, so let's jump into my topic for today. So I mentioned this already, but we're going to be talking about feedback. And in my opinion, feedback is a key component of being a better leader and a better human in general. And sometimes I feel like it's actually a lot easier to actually give feedback as opposed to receive it. So what I'm going to be talking about today actually is receiving feedback and some of the questions that you can actually ask people in your own network or within your own team to help you have a better understanding of how you're coming across and how you're being perceived. All right. So I've mentioned this before. I think that feedback is really key to being able to move forward, right? Key to really building your self-awareness. And the truth really is that at the end of the day, businesses, if you're trying to build your business, if you're trying to build your career, you're going to be engaging with people, and it's about relationships. So it's really important to understand how you're perceived. Because if you understand how you're perceived, you can build better partnerships, right? That will not only benefit you, but also benefit the people who are in the partnership. You can make more money, whether that's increasing how much people invest in you, right? As a service provider or as a consultant, right? Or even just as an employee, right? So understanding all these pieces about you, how you come across, how you're perceived, what people think about you, can really be leveraged in a really good way to be able to move you forward and propel your business forward in so many different ways. All right, just checking my sheet here to make sure that I cover everything, right? So getting feedback was something I used to be really afraid of, especially professionally. I did not want to hear what people thought. I definitely remember times being super upset, getting feedback, whether it was verbal or even written. I remember getting really upset. But at the end of the day, I also have found that the feedback really did help me shape how I approached other people. And prior to working for myself, I used to run teams. And so it really helped me reshape a lot of the relationships that I had, helped me reshape how I approach things, and really helped me get the best out of others, right? Because I think that the number one question that leaders should be asking, right? So whether you're a firefighting manager, whether you're an overwhelmed business owner, whether you are a disillusioned CEO, right? The main question you need to be asking is, what support does that member of your team, that consultant that you hire, that service provider that you bring on board, what do they actually need from you in order to be successful, right? Because a lot of times we might say things as leaders like, oh, it's their problem, it's their fault, they're not doing it right. But actually, it's our jobs as leaders to really make sure that we're creating that environment so that they can succeed, right? If we can create that environment for them to succeed and they're not succeeding, we can have another conversation. But in terms of the questions I'm going to be providing you today, in terms of thinking about feedback, it's really all about thinking about what you need to do as a leader to be able to provide the right feedback. To be able to provide the right environment for that team member or your team in general to do a much better job. All right, so what are some of those questions? And like I said, I'm taking this straight from a Google form I actually shared with members of my team. If any of you on there are interested in these specific questions or want the Google form, feel free to let me know. Happy to share it with you. So this was all about understanding. So at this time, my title was Managing Director / Country Manager. So it's all about understanding my performance as a country manager / managing director. So at this time, I was actually going between 2 countries. So I was working between Ghana and Nigeria, going back and forth every 2 weeks, okay? I think at this time, my team was about 30 or so people. Well, according to this, about 30 something people took the actual survey online, but my team was actually a little bit bigger than this, okay? And they were working between 2 different platforms. All right, so here are some of the questions that I asked. And I'm looking at some of the results. It's really interesting. If you'd like me to share the results with you, happy to do that. Happy to also create another video or actually share the actual results. But these are some of the questions I wanted to have answered. So the first question I have here, how comfortable do you feel voicing your concerns to your supervisor? All right, and then what I did was I put a scale from extremely comfortable to not comfortable at all. So luckily, no one actually selected not comfortable at all, but most people said they were very comfortable, all right, for those who actually completed this survey. And why is this question important? This question is important because at the end of the day, right, I was working in environments where members of my team actually understood the market a lot better than I did. So it was actually very important that I had a relationship with them where they felt like they could actually come to me with ideas, right, where they felt like their ideas were actually being implemented. So that's why I really thought this question was important. And so if you're building a team where you want it to be very dynamic, very engaged, if you want it to be very collaborative, asking a question around whether or not people feel comfortable coming to you can really help you get a good idea, a good picture of whether or not you're creating an environment where people actually feel like they can do that, right? So that psychological safety. All right. Another question along those lines is how available to employees is your supervisor, right? So asking the question, how available was I to these team members? So for the most part, most people said very available. So, not super surprised with that one. Okay, so this next one actually was all over the place. So the next question I asked, once again, was around how much they want to engage with me, how much they interact with me. So this question goes, would you like to interact with your supervisor more, less, or about the same as you currently interact with him or her? So of course it's a her in reference to me. And these ones are all over the map. Most people said about the same amount though. And once again, it's just trying to give you an idea of how your team feels about having access to you. And this is something that I talk to a lot of my clients about as well. This idea of you want to make sure that you're available, but you also want to make sure that you can get your own work done too, right? So you don't want to constantly be interrupted. So it's really important that you get an understanding of, right, whether or not your team members are happy with the type of access they have to you. And then you can also think about it from your point of view of whether or not you're okay with the amount of access that your team has as well, right? So looking at all of these pieces as data, right? Use this feedback as data to move forward when you're thinking about, putting together your schedule, when you're thinking about, okay, how often do I actually want to have people engage? Okay, I'm going to skip some of these additional questions. If you're interested in seeing these questions, like I mentioned before, let me know in the comments and I can share the entire list with you. But some of these next questions are just more around making sure that everyone knows we're on the same page and people really understanding where we're moving forward as a business, right? So getting that feedback from members of your team around whether they know what their KPIs are, whether they know the mission and vision of the company, and whether or not they understand why certain things are happening. And so if you're working especially within a startup environment, it's really, really key that people have a clear understanding of where you're going, right? So that vision, right? What success looks like. And the reason why is because what's happening in between might not always be super clear, right? But if you're all moving towards a vision, that can be incredibly, not only empowering, but very motivating and help build that momentum, right? If you're working within a more structured environment, it's still really important that people understand what their KPIs are and why things are happening, all right? So that's what these next few questions are, but I'm going to skip over those to get to the next question that I think is really key if you are a leader and you want to have a better understanding of whether or not you're coming across in a way that's really effective. And this question is, how often does your supervisor give feedback about your work? So once again, the majority of the people who took this particular survey about me said very often. Okay, so not too bad so far. All right. Next question, I think that's a great question that you want to ask, right? So getting feedback from members of your team. That next question is, how improved is your performance after getting feedback from your supervisor about your work? And I think, once again, this is a really key question, right? Because you don't just want to be giving feedback for feedback's sake. It's really important that you're giving actionable feedback. And that's what this particular question will help to capture, okay? Whether or not you're actually giving actionable feedback to members of your team. And once again, most people here said very improved in terms of their response to that question. And so it was a very simple, once again, scale of extremely improved to not at all improved, all right, in terms of how people were responding to this question, in terms of really thinking about how to use feedback and how important feedback is. All right. I'm going to skip some additional questions here. These are all about sort of rewards, incentives, trying to understand members of your team better. These are all really key things, once again, to keep in mind when you're thinking about getting feedback from your team to really understand what motivates them, what will keep them moving, what will get them momentum, what will help them achieve the goals you're looking to achieve. But I'm going to skip them because there's quite a few here. Once again, if you're interested in seeing the full list of all the questions that I asked in terms of my performance as a leader, let me know and I can share that with you. Okay. Interesting. One of the questions I actually put on was, how consistently does your supervisor punish, I never punished anyone really, but like punished employees for bad work? And this is a really interesting question because, once again, you're going to be able to build better rapport with members of your team. You're going to have more respect if you're able to call out people who aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so for the most part, people selected here moderately consistently. So how consistently? People said I moderately consistently punished. I didn't like punish, but like, there were repercussions. People had conversations with me, something, a conversation about what to do differently moving forward in terms of bad work. Okay. This is a really interesting question here in terms of feedback. How reasonable are the decisions made by your supervisor? Of course, reasonable, that's a very, how would you put that one? That particular question is an interesting one because who gets to define what reasonable is? But it's still something that you probably do want to keep in mind when you are thinking about feedback. And this is feedback season. So it's really important that you as a leader take the time to ask some of these questions. Take the time to look at some of your results if you are asking for feedback to see how you can do things differently moving forward. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the live, we do this because we want to make more money, we want to get more done, we want to be more efficient and effective, get better results, right? By not having to spend as much time. And when you leverage feedback effectively, you're going to be able to do that. All right, going to skip a few more questions here. All of these are really about making decisions and whether or not and how people rated my decision-making abilities, whether or not they disagree with my decisions, whether or not my expectations are realistic. I think that this is a great question to also ask. How often I respond to employee mistakes, okay? How reliable I am, that's a great question. How effectively I use company resources. This is a really interesting question. So based on the perspectives of members of your team, how do you use those resources? How are those resources used? How are they allocated from their own perspective? And then, last but not least, the last question I asked here was, overall, how satisfied are you with your supervisor? And so, once again, that range of extremely satisfied to very dissatisfied. And that, once again, will just give you a more rounded overall picture of how you feel, or how you feel your supervisor is doing. So in this case, how I was doing as a supervisor. So overall, people said very satisfied or moderately satisfied overall. So not too bad. And this was an anonymous survey that I sent. It doesn't have to be anonymous. You can do feedback sessions that are one-on-one. So there's so many different ways in which you can get feedback to help you improve really as a leader. And the last thing I included in this survey was open-ended questions where people could actually write down their own thoughts that might not have been captured in the more ranged-based questions. So the first question I asked within the survey question is, what does your supervisor need to improve his or her performance? Some of the responses I think are kind of entertaining, not surprising, but a little entertaining. So some of the things that people said, he needs to make sure those people working in the office attend urgently to guys working in the office. That's fair. Push for raise. There's a lot of pushing for raises. Feedback before final decision. So that's one thing that I try to work on a whole lot, trying to get that feedback before making a decision, or try to include people in my decision making. Once again, just to create that collaborative environment, to get that buy-in. Get more flexible with the budget. So one thing my team members always said when I was working was that I was too frugal. Okay, they didn't use the word frugal. They said I was cheap. I say I was frugal because they wanted to do a lot of offline stuff, and I was just always like, no offline stuff, no business cards for you. That's not going to bring us money. So people really always talked about how frugal I was with the marketing budget. So I'm not surprised with that one. Official meetings one-on-one with the staff. So that's something that I actually started to implement after having this survey go out and getting the responses. Let's see, listen to our opinions more. Once again, I try to be a lot more collaborative because naturally my innate personality is not to be that collaborative, to be honest. I'm more than happy to make decisions and move forward. But one of the things I learned was that I had to be more collaborative. I had to listen to opinions more. I had to include people into the process a little bit more so I could move faster. So for me, one of the stories I was telling myself was that, including people makes the process slower. But I quickly realized actually that by including people, it actually got things done a lot faster, right? So that initial bit might take a little bit longer, but overall, in terms of trying to get stuff done, in terms of moving forward, it was so much faster when I got that buy-in. What else I got? Needs to take more feedback from employees. Yes, that's the reason why I did this survey. She's good, but she can do better, especially in the consideration of team suggestions and applications. So as you can see, there's a lot of people saying that I really needed to work on getting not just more feedback, but implementing the feedback, which is exactly why I put together this survey. I thought it'd be one of the easiest and most effective ways to get that feedback, and it was something that I could do consistently. And I think I did implement this a few more times. All right, improve on communication. I could always improve on communication. All right, be an effective leader. Totally. Listener. Sorry, they said effective listener here. Taking into consideration the decision of the employee, 100%. Once again, one of the reasons why I put together this survey. Teamwork, better frequent communication. So I also started implementing some things around communication simply because I was working between two markets. All right, a clearer vision for the staff to follow. Once again, right, I heard this feedback, and so I wanted to make sure I had the data to back up why I was making certain decisions and why I was thinking about putting certain things into my schedule in relation to what my team needed. And what they needed was for me to be more collaborative, to include them more, and to be a lot more open about what our end goal was, right? And that's what really has come through time and time again in their survey. All right, so what should your supervisor's priorities for the next 3 months be? Was the next question I asked. I'm not gonna go through these things here because a lot of what I mentioned before actually was sort of reiterated in what my focus should be. So also, taking it back to the team. I had an idea of what I should be focused on, but what did my team think I should be focused on? I think is a great question to ask. And once again, this is feedback season. This is when you need to have people on your team telling you those things, right? Because they're the ones who are usually the ones who are going out there, engaging with people, engaging with your clients, learning a lot, and they have a lot to probably also tell you about where you need to go and where the business can go as well, okay? What else did I ask here? All right, yeah, so that was really the last question I asked. What should my priorities be over the next 3 months? All right, so that's, I think what I really wanted to share today. Just talk a little bit more about, the fact that this is feedback season, right? Because it is feedback season, even you as a leader, whether you're a CEO, a manager, a VP, a founder, even a solo entrepreneur, it's really important that you take the time to ask people that you work with, whether you work with them directly or indirectly, right? How you're coming across, right? What they think your strengths are, what you could improve on, and maybe even what you should focus on, all right? And so today I walked you through this really simple performance survey that I did so now it's 4 years ago, so 2016, all right, on my thoughts on, what I thought was important to ask, the type of feedback that I got. If you're interested in seeing this full survey with the questions, both the open-ended questions and then also the range-based questions I asked, feel free to get in touch. Happy to share that with you. But really just want to reiterate, don't be afraid to get feedback. It can only help you move forward. It can only help you connect better with your team, and it can only help you focus better. All right. So once again, if you want to learn a little bit more about my approach to leadership that leverages not just yourself, but also thinking about leveraging others and leveraging your time more effectively, I'll put a link in the comments to my free guide that includes 3 steps. And that first step really is building your self-awareness, and getting feedback is a great way to build your self-awareness. All right. So thank you again for taking the time. And I hope that this was valuable, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. All right. Bye.